The lights in the studio burned bright as cameras rolled and the crowd settled into a charged silence. It was supposed to be a civil political debate, but the energy in the room said otherwise. On one side of the stage sat Pam Bondi, dressed sharply in her signature cream blazer, pearl earrings glinting under the lights. Her reputation was well known, confident, quick-tongued, and unafraid to challenge anyone who dared to cross her. Across from her sat Amadou Traoré, a respected African diplomat known for his calm tone and thoughtful words. He wore a simple navy blue suit, a light blue shirt, and no tie, his quiet confidence contrasting sharply with Pam's assertive posture. As the moderator introduced the topic, leadership in times of division, it took only moments for sparks to fly. Pam leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Mr. Traoré," she began, "with all due respect, people like you might have passion, but that doesn't mean you're fit to lead. Leadership requires strength, not speeches." The audience reacted instantly. Some gasped, others whispered. Even the moderator shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Traoré didn't flinch. His expression stayed calm, almost peaceful. He folded his hands gently on the table and waited for her to finish, his eyes never leaving hers. Pam wasn't done. She smirked, adjusting her microphone. "Let's be honest here," she continued. "You talk about equality and empathy. Nice words, sure. But the world isn't built on feelings. It's built on power, and you simply don't have that kind of presence." The crowd murmured louder now. The insult was clear, but Traoré still said nothing. Not a single word. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and smiled. Not arrogantly, but knowingly. For a moment, even Pam seemed unsure of what to say next. The tension in the studio was so thick, it could be felt through the camera lens. Viewers at home leaned forward waiting, and then, just as Pam crossed her arms and looked away, Traoré finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, and disarmingly confident. "Miss Bondi," he said softly, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to answer that." No one in the studio, not even Pam Bondi herself, was ready for what he said next. The studio lights seemed hotter now. Even through the screen, the air felt thick, the kind of silence that hums just before a storm. Traoré leaned forward slightly, his calm composure unshaken. "Miss Bondi," he began, his voice smooth and deliberate, "when you say I am unfit to lead, do you mean I lack experience? Or that I don't fit your definition of a leader?" Pam's eyes narrowed. She wasn't expecting him to question her so directly, or so politely. "My definition?" she replied quickly. "No, Mr. Traoré, I mean the world's definition. Leaders don't hesitate. They don't hide behind poetic speeches, they act. And from what I've seen, you spend more time talking about unity than achieving it." The words hit like darts, the audience murmured, sensing the tension rising again. But Traoré didn't fire back. Instead, he nodded slightly, acknowledging her words with quiet grace. He spoke softly. "I see. So you believe strength and empathy cannot exist together?" Pam leaned back, folding her arms, smirking confidently. "Strength is about control, Mr. Traoré, not compassion. You can't run a nation on kindness." There it was, the core of her argument. The crowd was divided. Some nodded in agreement, others frowned. But before Traoré could reply, Pam continued, her tone sharpening like a blade. "Let's not pretend here. You may be passionate, but passion doesn't make a president. People need someone who commands fear, not sympathy." A faint sound of disapproval rippled through the audience. The moderator hesitated, glancing toward Traoré, perhaps to step in, but he didn't need to. Traoré lifted his gaze, his eyes warm yet piercing, and said quietly, "Maybe fear is what keeps people in line, Miss Bondi. But respect, that's what keeps them together." The audience went still. Pam blinked, for the first time unsure how to respond. He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't have to. Every word was deliberate, measured, powerful in its restraint. She laughed lightly, trying to regain control. "That's a nice quote for a college classroom, but not for real politics." Traoré smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But maybe politics could use a little more humanity." The crowd reacted instantly. A low wave of applause swelled, growing louder as people began nodding. The moderator, sensing the moment, leaned forward to calm the energy. But the audience wasn't done. Pam looked around, momentarily thrown off by the reaction. Then, regaining her composure, she turned back to him. "Tell me something, Mr. Traoré," she said. "Do you honestly believe that you could lead a nation full of conflict, corruption, and power-hungry politicians, simply by being nice?" This time, Traoré didn't answer right away. He let her words hang in the air, long enough for the audience to feel their sting. Then he replied slowly and firmly, "I don't believe in leading by being nice, Miss Bondi. I believe in leading by being just." The crowd erupted again, louder this time. Some clapped, others cheered quietly. Pam's expression hardened. She wasn't used to losing control of the narrative, and Traoré wasn't even trying to take it from her. He was simply being himself. He continued, "Leadership isn't proven when times are easy. It's revealed when times are hardest. You don't lead people by ruling them. You lead them by serving them." Even the moderator paused, glancing at Pam, then back at Traoré. There was something magnetic about his voice, and steady, sincere, unshakably respectful. Pam tried to cut in. "That sounds very inspiring, Mr. Traoré, but people don't elect philosophers. They elect decision-makers." Traoré nodded again. "True, but maybe they should elect people who think before they decide." The audience laughed lightly, and even Pam cracked a nervous smile. Then, Traoré turned his head slightly toward the camera, as if speaking directly to those watching at home. His tone softened, inviting, genuine. "I know many people watching this have faced criticism too. People who were told they were unfit to achieve something, to dream bigger, to lead. But remember this, being calm doesn't make you weak. Being kind doesn't make you naive. It makes you different, and sometimes that's what the world needs most." A hush fell over the audience again. For a brief second, it didn't feel like a debate anymore. It felt like a lesson. Engagement break. On-screen cue. If someone's ever doubted your worth, if you've ever been told you're not good enough, comment below with, "I am enough." And tell me, which country or city are you watching this story from right now? I love seeing how far these stories reach. The camera zoomed in on Traoré's calm expression. Pam blinked again, trying to find her footing. She leaned forward with a forced smile. "You're very eloquent, Mr. Traoré," she said. "But speeches don't run governments." He smiled politely. "No," he replied. "But integrity does." That line landed like a thunderclap. The audience cheered again, louder than before. Even a few people on Pam's side of the stage clapped involuntarily. The moderator raised a hand, trying to restore order, but the debate had clearly shifted. Pam Bondi, confident, seasoned, used to winning verbal duel, suddenly looked like she was facing something far more powerful than opposition. She was facing truth, and it was delivered so calmly that it couldn't be dismissed. And as the applause echoed across the studio, one thing became clear. Pam Bondi had just met her match, and his next words would leave her speechless. The applause faded, but the atmosphere in the studio was still electric. Everyone could feel it. Something had shifted. Pam Bondi, usually in full control of her debates, now sat unusually still. Her eyes flickered, scanning Traoré's calm expression. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't even look smug. He simply looked grounded. The moderator cleared his throat. "All right, let's move forward," he said, forcing a smile. "Miss Bondi, you have the floor again." Pam straightened in her chair, regaining her confidence. "Well," she began, "Mr. Traoré certainly has a way with words. But let's be honest, speeches don't fix economies, they don't stop wars, and they don't unite divided nations. We need more than inspiration. We need action." She turned toward him sharply. "So tell us, Mr. Traoré, what exactly would you do differently if you were leading this country?" The room went silent again. Pam leaned back, satisfied that she'd cornered him. This was her strength: policy, logic, specifics. She expected him to stumble, to hesitate, but Traoré didn't blink. He folded his hands and said softly, "The problem isn't that people don't want change, Miss Bondi. The problem is that too many leaders want credit instead of progress." A ripple of murmurs filled the audience again. Pam raised an eyebrow. "That's a nice soundbite," she said, "but you didn't answer my question." Traoré smiled faintly. "I did," he replied, "because the real answer starts with character. Without integrity, even the best policies fail. Leadership isn't about knowing everything, it's about standing for something. The crowd murmured louder now. Someone clapped in the back row. Pam, feeling the pressure, interrupted. So what you're saying is what? That good intentions can replace experience? Traoré looked directly at her. No, I'm saying that experience without empathy becomes arrogance. And arrogance destroys nations. The crowd gasped audibly. Pam's expression hardened again. He continued, his tone still even, but his words carried weight. I've seen leaders rise because they promised power, and fall because they forgot people. I've seen governments crumble not because of lack of resources, but because of lack of conscience. The moment a leader stops listening, they stop leading. For a moment, Pam didn't move. She was listening, and so was everyone else. But then she smirked faintly, breaking the tension. That's quite the sermon. Mr. Traoré, you sound more like a preacher than a politician. Traoré smiled. Maybe that's what politics needs sometimes, and a reminder of its humanity. Laughter and applause broke out across the studio. Even the moderator couldn't hide a small smile. Pam tried to speak again, but Traoré leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, but with conviction. You said earlier that I was unfit to lead, he said. Maybe you're right. If leadership means shouting the loudest, blaming the most, or dividing people to win votes, then yes, I'm unfit. But if leadership means bringing people together, standing firm on truth and serving with humility, then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The room erupted. Cameras panned to the audience, capturing faces of surprise, admiration, and even awe. Pam pressed her lips together, visibly struggling to respond. He wasn't attacking her. He wasn't defensive. He was simply winning hearts, one sentence at a time. When the noise settled, Pam took a breath. That all sounds wonderful, she said tightly. But this isn't a fairy tale. Politics is ruthless. It's not about idealism, it's about survival. Traoré tilted his head slightly. And yet, he said gently, it's ideals that outlive every politician. A hush fell again. Pam opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. He continued, his voice calm and steady. History doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who stood for something when it mattered most. Power fades, but purpose doesn't. The camera zoomed in. His tone wasn't rehearsed. It came from somewhere real. Then, almost as if addressing everyone watching at home, he said, every person listening tonight, you have power too. Maybe not in a government office, but in your home, in your work, in your community. Don't let anyone tell you you're unfit to lead your own life with kindness, honesty, and courage. Real leadership begins there. The audience erupted again, clapping, cheering, standing. Pam looked toward the moderator, clearly frustrated. Are we still having a debate, she asked sharply, or a motivational seminar? The moderator chuckled nervously. It's becoming both, he said, earning laughter from the crowd. Traoré smiled humbly. I didn't come here to preach, he said. I came here to prove that respect and strength can exist in the same room. And I think we've just shown that they can. The crowd loved it. Pam forced a polite smile, but her composure was slipping. She had entered this debate expecting to expose him, but instead, she was being outshined by his grace. He turned slightly toward her again, his expression kind but firm. You see, Miss Bondi, he said, being unfit isn't about where someone comes from. It's about what they stand for. And if standing for equality, respect, and truth makes me unfit, then I'll wear that title proudly. The audience rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous. Even the cameras shook slightly from the energy. Pam's lips parted and she looked stunned. For once, she had no rebuttal. If you believe real leadership comes from integrity, not ego, drop a in the comments and tell me where you're watching this from. I love seeing voices of unity from around the world. The camera caught Pam's face, still frozen between disbelief and forced composure. The moderator looked from one to the other, smiling awkwardly. Then, as the applause finally began to fade, he said softly into his mic, Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's what you call a mic drop moment. The audience laughed and clapped again. Louder than ever, Pam glanced down at her notes and then at Traoré. And finally, at the crowd. For the first time in her long career, the words just wouldn't come. And as the camera zoomed in on her silent expression, the world realized this debate wasn't about who was right. It was about who had the courage to stay calm when truth spoke louder than power. For a few long seconds, the studio was completely silent. Pam Bondi, fierce, articulate, and famously quick-witted, sat motionless. The bright studio lights glared across her face as she tried to find the right words. But none came. Across from her, Traoré remained still, calm as ever. His expression hadn't changed. No gloating, no smirk, just quiet composure. The audience's silence slowly turned into murmurs. Then claps. Pam extended her hand. "You're good," she said softly, almost respectfully. Traoré smiled warmly, shaking her hand. "No, Miss Bondi," he said. "I'm just grateful for the conversation." That humility disarmed her completely. For the first time that night, she smiled genuinely. "Well, I hope you're ready for what's coming after this." He nodded. "If it starts a conversation about respect and truth, then yes, I am." The crowd erupted again, cheering both of them. By the time the show ended, clips of that final handshake were everywhere. On Twitter, TikTok, and news feeds, millions were replaying the moment when the unfit to lead candidate left one of America's toughest interviewers speechless. Comment sections overflowed with reactions. "That's leadership right there." Pam tried to destroy him, but he built the whole room instead. He didn't just win the debate, he won respect. Within hours, late-night shows were replaying excerpts of his speech. News anchors debated what it meant for politics. And while pundits argued about strategy, the public saw something simpler: a man who refused to meet aggression with arrogance. Pam Bondi's name trended beside his, but not for the reasons she wanted. Some praised her courage for facing him. Others said she underestimated him, but everyone agreed on one thing: Traoré's calmness had changed the tone of the entire debate. That night, in his hotel room, Traoré sat quietly watching the replay. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just whispered a quiet prayer of thanks and texted his mother. "You were right, Mama." The truth was loud enough. If you believe calmness is the strongest form of power, comment, "Truth is loud enough." And tell me, what country or city are you watching this story from? It's amazing to see how far messages like this can travel. But as the world celebrated Traoré's words, one question began to spread online. Would this moment make him a global icon or a target? By sunrise, the entire world had seen it. Clip of Traoré calmly dismantling Pam Bondi's attack wasn't just trending, it was dominating. Every social feed from Washington to Nairobi news outlets replayed the exchange on loop. Pam Bondi's bold accusation, his quiet pause, that unforgettable line. "If standing for equality makes me unfit, then I'll wear that title proudly." It had become more than a debate moment. It was a movement. Headlines appeared everywhere. Traoré redefines leadership in 3 minutes. Bondi left speechless in live debate, the calm that silenced the storm. Clips were stitched into motivational edits, shared with captions like "Some real leadership," Traoré truth, and "respect over power." Even celebrities and world leaders chimed in. One well-known humanitarian tweeted, "We need more leaders like this, humble, firm, and fearless." But as the praise spread, so did the criticism. Not everyone liked seeing a political outsider dominate a debate veteran. In the early hours of the morning, Pam Bondi sat alone in her office. The light from her phone screen reflected on her face, notification after notification, all saying the same thing. Some congratulated her for facing him. Most, though, said she had lost. Her assistant entered quietly, carrying a cup of coffee. "You should probably stay off social media," she said gently. Pam didn't answer. She was scrolling through comments. Then she spoke almost to herself. "It's not that he beat me. It's that he made people feel something." She set the phone down, rubbing her temples. That's rare and dangerous. Meanwhile, across town, Traoré's team was overwhelmed. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Invitations from talk shows, interview requests, political panels. Everyone wanted him. A staff member burst into the room, eyes wide. "You just hit 50 million views in 8 hours. Traoré looked up from his notebook, startled. 50 million? He repeated, almost amused. "Yes, and counting. CNN wants a follow-up interview. The BBC's requesting an op-ed. Even the European networks are calling." He smiled faintly. "That's unbelievable." His campaign manager grinned. "Sir, this could change everything. We should capitalize on this momentum." Press conference, merchandise, fundraising? Traoré raised a hand gently. No, he said quietly. No fundraising. No slogans. Let the words breathe. The room went silent. He looked out the window where the morning sun was breaking through the city skyline. This wasn't about me. It was about reminding people that respect is power. If we turn it into politics, it loses its meaning. The manager sighed but nodded. Understood. Hours later, a journalist asked him during a live interview, Mr. Traoré, millions are calling you the future of leadership. How does that feel? He smiled softly. It feels like responsibility. And responsibility isn't fame, with service. The interviewer pressed further. Pam Bondi hasn't commented since the debate. What would you say to her if she's watching right now? Traoré didn't hesitate. I'd thank her, because without disagreement, truth has no test. She made me stronger, and I hope I made her think. The host paused, visibly moved. That's unexpectedly gracious, Traoré smiled again. Grace isn't weakness. It's discipline. The clip spread instantly, another viral wave. People were astonished at his humility. One user wrote, Imagine a world where politicians spoke like this. But not everyone was applauding. Behind closed doors, political analysts, donors, and party strategists were meeting. He's a problem, one advisor said sharply. Too clean. Too composed. He's making the establishment look heartless. Another added, We can't attack him directly. That'll backfire. But maybe we can question his record, his funding, his background, something that makes people doubt him. They began crafting talking points, subtle rumors, anything to chip away at his newfound credibility. By evening, headlines began to shift slightly. Is Traoré too idealistic for real politics? Critics say his calm masked lack of substance. Bondi allies claim debate was unfairly edited, but the public wasn't buying it. The video was live and raw. Millions had seen it unfold in real time. The more they tried to smear him, the more his popularity grew. That night, Traoré's phone rang. It was Pam, he answered, surprised. Miss Bondi? Her voice was calm, almost weary. Mr. Traoré, I just wanted to say, I didn't expect you to handle that the way you did. I came to debate, not to be humbled. He chuckled softly. It's easy to confuse humility with defeat, Miss Bondi. You were honest. That's rare. I respect that. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, You made me think. I still disagree with you on almost everything, but I understand you better now. Then that's progress, he replied warmly. She exhaled slowly. Take care of yourself, Mr. Traoré. The higher you rise, the harder they'll try to pull you down. He smiled faintly. I'll remember that. Thank you. When the call ended, Traoré sat quietly for a moment, reflecting. He knew she was right. Fame wasn't victory. It was a test. If you think real power comes from calmness and respect, type lead with grace in the comments. And tell me which country or city you're watching this from. It's incredible how these stories connect hearts across borders. Later that night, Traoré stood by his hotel window, gazing at the city lights. He whispered softly to himself, Truth spreads faster than fire, but only if it's pure. Down below, a crowd had already gathered, people holding candles, signs reading Respect is Power. The movement had begun. But as the cheers rose outside, his phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made him pause. It read, They're coming after you next. The message arrived just past midnight, no name. No sender. Just 7 words glowing on Traoré's phone screen. They're coming after you. Be ready. He read it twice, frowning slightly. His security advisor urged him to turn off his phone and rest, but Traoré knew what it meant. The calm before the next storm was over. By morning, the headlines had shifted again. Was Traoré's viral moment a setup? Anonymous sources claimed debate was staged. Who is Traoré really? Dozens of political commentators filled the airwaves, dissecting his every word, his tone, even his smile. Some called him a hero. Others painted him as a manipulator, a charismatic performer with no real experience. Pam Bondi's warning echoed in his head. The higher you rise, the harder they'll pull you down. Inside his campaign office, tension was thick. His team huddled around screens, watching talking heads argue about him. They're saying you rehearsed the line about humility, his communications director said bitterly. They're twisting your sincerity into strategy. Another staffer added, "We can't stay quiet anymore. We need to fight back, correct the record." Traoré raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "No," he said quietly. "We don't fight lies with more noise. We fight them with truth than time." The room went silent. His manager sighed. "But sir, silence looks like guilt," he smiled faintly. "Sometimes silence is confidence." The team exchanged worried looks. They respected him, but they feared his calm might cost them everything. By afternoon, reporters were camping outside his home. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted over each other. "Mr. Traoré, do you deny coordinating with the network? Did Pam Bondi know you'd use her for publicity? Who's funding your campaign?" He stopped at the gates, looked directly into the cameras, and said simply, "I don't deny questions. I welcome them. But let's ask the right ones, and not who's loudest, but who's honest." Then he turned and walked away. The clip aired everywhere. Again. Some praised his composure. Others called it arrogance. The media storm intensified. Every channel, every feed, every podcast had an opinion. That evening, his team watched nervously as Pam Bondi finally broke her silence in a televised interview. She spoke carefully. "I don't think Mr. Traoré is a bad man," she said. "But politics is not about peace, and it's about power. And in power, peace doesn't survive long." Her words hit him like a quiet echo. Not malicious, just painfully true. Later that night, he stood before a small group of supporters in a town hall. No teleprompter, no grand stage. Just a few hundred people who still believed in him. One woman stood and asked, "Mr. Traoré, they're calling you weak for not fighting back. Are you afraid of losing?" He smiled gently. "No, I'm afraid of winning the wrong way." The crowd murmured in admiration. He continued, "When truth is attacked, people panic. They think the only answer is to fight louder. But anger doesn't protect truth. Patience does. The louder they lie, the calmer I'll stay." A man shouted from the back, "But calm doesn't win elections." Traoré looked at him kindly. "Maybe not. But it wins people's hearts, and that's how change begins." The audience erupted in applause, clapping louder than ever. Some were crying. Others were filming, knowing they were witnessing something rare, a leader who refused to compromise his peace. But outside that hall, forces were already moving. Opposition strategists were crafting attack ads. One headline read, "Traoré, the man who won't fight for you. News." Anchors debated endlessly whether calmness equaled cowardice. Clips of his silence were edited to look like hesitation. Poll numbers began to slip. His closest aide confronted him that night. "You have to respond. They're twisting your words, destroying your image." Traoré simply replied, "If they can destroy me with lies, then I was never strong enough to lead with truth." The aide looked at him, frustrated but moved. "You really believe people will see through it?" He nodded. "Eventually. Truth always outlasts noise." A few days later, Pam Bondi reached out again, this time privately. Her message was short. "They're trying to pit us against each other. Don't let them." He read it and smiled softly. Even his former opponent now understood what he had been saying all along. Division feeds the powerful. Unity threatens them. He replied simply, "I won't. Thank you." The backlash didn't stop, but something unexpected began to happen. People who had once ignored politics started paying attention again, not because of scandals, but because of his composure. Clips of his calm responses became motivational content. Schools played his debate moments in ethics classes. Teachers wrote his quotes on chalkboards. "Power fades. Purpose doesn't. Strength is calm under fire," a journalist wrote. In an age of shouting, Traoré is teaching the world how to listen again. If you believe silence can be strength, type "calm is power" in the comments. And tell me which country or city you're watching this from. It's inspiring to see how far messages of truth can travel. That night, as he walked onto his balcony overlooking the city, the noise of traffic and chaos below blended into a hum. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "If truth costs me everything, I'll still pay the price." His phone buzzed again, a message from his aide. "They've just announced another debate." Pam's agreed to join again. "The whole world will be watching," Traoré smiled, closing his eyes. Then let them see what calm looks like twice, because this time, it wasn't about proving he could lead. It was about proving that truth could survive the fire. The debate hall shimmered with anticipation. Every seat was taken. Every light trained on the stage where Pam Bondi and Traoré would meet again. The world was watching. From bustling cities to quiet villages, screens lit up with the same question. Will Traoré fight back this time? Pam sat poised behind her podium, calm but cautious. She had spent nights replaying their first exchange, haunted not by anger, but by the quiet truth in his words. Traoré entered with the same unshaken composure. No entourage, no fanfare. Just his soft smile and that familiar sense of peace that seemed to silence even noise itself. The moderator greeted them. Tonight, we revisit the question that sparked a global conversation. What makes a leader fit to lead? A hush fell over the audience. Pam began first. Her tone was sharp, professional, but there was something different this time. Less hostility, more reflection. I've always believed leadership requires strength, she said. But maybe strength doesn't always have to be loud. The crowd stirred. She looked across at Traoré. You prove that sometimes silence speaks louder than speeches. But I still wonder, can calmness survive in politics? Traoré smiled. Only if we protect it, he said softly. Calmness isn't weakness. It's control. It's the strength to stand your ground without needing to shout. The audience leaned forward. Every word seemed to echo with meaning. Pam studied him, visibly moved, and asked, Then tell us, and what does it mean to lead, really? Traoré's gaze swept across the hall. Journalists, students, workers, ordinary people all watching, waiting. He began slowly. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's not about commanding people. It's about understanding them. It's not about having all the answers, and it's about asking the right questions. He paused, then looked straight into the camera. A true leader doesn't build walls of pride. They build bridges of purpose. And if being calm under fire makes me unfit, then maybe our definition of leadership needs to change. The room erupted in applause. Even Pam couldn't hide her admiration. She nodded slowly, as if surrendering not to defeat but to understanding. When her turn came, she said something no one expected. I called you unfit to lead, she said, her voice steady, but I was wrong. You reminded me that leadership isn't about control. It's about conviction. The crowd gasped. Pam continued, I still don't agree with everything you stand for, but I respect how you stand for it, and that's what this world needs. People who can disagree without destroying each other. The two of them, once rivals, now symbols of civility, stood in silence as the audience rose to its feet. Cameras flashed. Viewers at home felt a rare emotion in today's world, hope. The next morning, the clip went viral again, but this time for a different reason. Hashtags flooded the internet. Respect over rage, Traoré Bondi moment. Calm is power comment sections that once overflowed with hate now filled with unity. People from across the world wrote, I'm from Kenya. Watching this made me believe in politics again. Here in the Philippines, we need leaders like him. From London, respect to both of them. This is how change starts. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It had become a movement. Weeks later, Traoré gave a speech to his supporters standing under an open sky. He said, They said truth was too quiet to win. But maybe the world was just too noisy to hear it. Now they're listening, and that means we're already winning. He looked up and smiled as his words echoed through the crowd. Pam, watching from home, smiled too. The camera zoomed in on Traoré's face, calm, centered, timeless. Remember this, he said in closing. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to mean what you say and live it. The crowd erupted. Some cried, some prayed, but all believed. If you believe real leadership is about respect, not rage, and type lead with truth in the comments. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. Let's see how far calmness can travel. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove dignity still wins.